Hey everyone, welcome in. It is a Tuesday edition, a post-practice edition of the Utopia Football Podcast. I'm Sean Pendergast, one half of Payne and Pendergast on Sports Radio 610, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. for one more day, Wednesday, and then we're back to 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. on the regular on the Texans flagship, Sports Radio 610. Good to be with you. I am moments removed, probably about an hour removed from Texans training camp practice number 10, I believe 10. Is today, if I'm not mistaken. And the Texans will not practice tomorrow. In fact, they're traveling tomorrow to Canton, Ohio for the Hall of Fame game, which we will have you covered for, not only on the radio, but I'll have a preview of that on the podcast a little bit later on this week. Just to lay out some administrative stuff here first, a reminder, and I'll remind you again, to subscribe to the podcast. Very helpful for both you and me to click that subscribe button, because that means you'll get the podcast wherever it is you get your podcast sent to you automatically. And now we're in that time of year where it's really crucial to let computers do the work for you. Just serve it up to you, spoon feed you, and we've got you covered here on the Utopia Football Podcast. Number 2, mailbag episode I am going to record probably later today or Wednesday morning to drop on Wednesday for you. I'm just trying to spread out the episodes a little bit with the practice today. This will be today's content. I'll have a mailbag for you. That'll run on Wednesday this week, and then we'll preview the Hall of Fame game Thursday, and then we'll have a review of the Hall of Fame game, kind of a winners and losers quick pod on Friday. So keep it keep the podcast front of mind, and obviously Sports Radio 610 front of mind as well, as we get you ready for the very first actual game of the Texans season. We'll talk about that in just a second. Before we get to stuff that happened out at practice today and stuff that's going to happen later this week, the Denico Autry suspension for 6 games for PED violations, I'll call it, came down literally as I was hitting end recording on yesterday's episode. So rather than re-record the episode, I'm sure you guys got plenty of opinion and conjecture on that, both on our show on Sports Radio 610 as well as other various Texans platforms. I did want to share a few thoughts on that, especially because D'Amico Ryans has now talked about it. Conveniently enough, the team announced that Autry was being suspended just after all the media sessions went down at yesterday's practice. D'Amico, and it's so tough with a D'Amico talking about a Denico. D'Amico with an M, head coach Ryans, said all the right things today, which is, hey, Denico put out a statement. That's where he stands on it. The team backs him up, and they're basically going to welcome him back in week 7 when he's done serving his 6-game suspension. This is not, and I know Denico put out a statement as well talking about what happened, his version of the story, and it's a believable version of the story. I have no idea. The hair trigger reaction with any of this stuff seems to be that whoever's talking about it is lying and they're a roid head and everything else. I have no idea what the situation is, other than I don't really know Denico Autry that well, and I don't know him to be a dishonest person. So I'm going to take him at his word that whatever happened with the place that was doing a prescription for him and switched the prescription up, and the new prescription had a banned substance in it that he was unaware of, then I take him at his word. The bottom line is he's going to be suspended 6 games, whether he was willfully or unwillfully taking a performance-enhancing or a banned substance that fell under the PED violations for the NFL. So he's going to be missing for 6 games. This is not a suspension that should have everybody changing their predictions for the first 6 games of the year. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a quarterback. It's not a cluster of injuries at a certain position. It's not Laramie Tunsil, who his absence has been felt throughout training camp. We'll get to that in just a little bit. This is Denico Autry, who is a rotational defensive lineman, albeit one that the Texans are paying a decent amount of money to, 2-year, $20 million contract. He was one of the first signings in free agency, and he was coming off an 11.5 sack season in 2023 after several seasons of tormenting the Texans when he was with the Titans and he was with the Colts. So that felt good to land him even at the advanced age of 33. And he was one of the first signings. So the thought was, wow, you're going to put him across from Will Anderson? That's a pretty good duo right there. Will had 7.5 sacks last year and was an ascending player at the end of the year. And Denico Autry, a solid vet who can get to the quarterback both inside and outside. Well, then you sign Danielle Hunter, and the calculus just completely changes because now you've got Hunter and Will Anderson, 2 potentially elite. I mean, Hunter, an actual elite, and Anderson, a potentially elite edge rusher. And now you've got Autry on the inside, which is just a unicorn compared to what other teams have on third down around the league. That got very exciting. We're going to have to put that on hold for 6 games, and then we'll see how long the burn-in period is for Denico Autry to really get his groove going once he comes back from this suspension. So that's unfortunate. It doesn't have me changing my prediction on the season for the Texans. It does eat away at their depth. It gives you less margin for error in terms of, not error, but it gives you less margin for injury or players being out for whatever reason. That's one big brick out of the wall. The wall is still fine, but the beginning of any sort of cluster injury or cluster hiatus, there's always got to be a first one. This is the first one the Texans are experiencing here. So I'm more bummed out that we're not going to get to see that combination of all those guys rushing the passer than I am concerned that the Texans are all of a sudden going to go 2-4 in those 6 games. So my predictions don't change at all, but it's unfortunate. I hate to see it. The schedule is actually pretty forgiving early in the season. That's the one saving grace in all of this. 5 of the 6 teams the Texans played to start the season this year didn't make the playoffs last year. Now, there were a couple that were close. Jacksonville is week 4. They blew it. They finished 9-8 and lost not only the division, but lost a shot at the postseason. Indianapolis is week 1, similar. They actually make a few plays at the end of the game against the Texans in week 18. Then they're in the playoffs and the Texans are not. And then they play the other non-playoff teams they play are the Chicago Bears in week 2, which Denico Autry would have been nice to have in that one, chasing Caleb Williams around. Week 3, they play the Minnesota Vikings. Zero impact for me as far as my prediction on that game, or the Patriots in week 6. The only playoff team that they play, the Texans, in the first 6 weeks are the Buffalo Bills in week 5. And I think that's a regressing playoff team from last year. So fortunately, the schedule is fairly forgiving for those first 6 games, but it's unfortunate for Denico Autry himself, who might have piled up some numbers in those games. Big winners in this one, anybody who took the under 8.5 sacks for Denico Autry this year, which I did. So he's going to miss 6 games. I think there's zero chance he gets to 9 sacks this year with only 11 games. And Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter racing him to the quarterback on third down. The other wrinkle to all this is the J.J. Watt speculation. J.J. Watt revealed at his charity softball game back in early May that he had told D'Amico Ryans if he ever needed him to call him and he would come play if it was an emergency. He's staying in shape well enough to play football. If you've seen JJ's Instagram, you know this. So he's kind of a break glass in case of emergency. This is not that emergency. It sucks that they're losing Denico Autry for 6 games, but this is not to that degree. JJ does not want to come back for week 1. I promise you that. If he's coming back, it's more like week 10. So I like I said, this is not that level of emergency. I don't know what that level of emergency would be, but it would certainly involve at least one of the names, Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. You know what I mean? Like if one of them were to be out for an extended period later on in the season, then that's JJ Watt level potential type stuff. This is not that. So anybody speculating like, hey, JJ's flexing on his Instagram. He looks chiseled out of granite. He looks amazing. I bet he could go get 10 sacks. Yeah, I bet he could too. I just don't think he wants to go through the grind of a full football season. He wants to see and make sure that the Texans or any other team that he would potentially look at is in contention to get to a Super Bowl, to do things that J.J. Watt has not gotten to experience in his career. I think we'll have a pretty good grasp of who the Texans are by about the middle of the season, by about week 9 or 10. If I were JJ, I would wait till after that 3-game series of primetime games for the Texans. I think the first 8 games are a very manageable slate. I'll be disappointed if they're worse than 6-2 in those first 8 games. And then I think the next 3, week 9, 10, and 11, at the Jets on Halloween night, Thursday, home for the Lions on primetime Sunday, and then at the Cowboys for Monday Night Football. I think we'll have a pretty good grasp on who the Texans are once those 3 games take place. So, but JJ ain't coming back right now. No chance. Zero chance. So those are my thoughts on the Denico Autry situation. It's unfortunate. As far as practice today goes, the defense had their way with the Texans once again. Right now, if I had to say, if there's an area of concern on the team, it's the offensive line. Granted, it's been without Laramie Tunsil for the entire camp, but the interior offensive line, I'm talking first string too, has been leaky against the first string defense. The backups have not fared much better in terms of keeping the defense off of the quarterbacks. That's been where, and this is by design. This is how Denico designed this defense. That the defensive line is eating right now, in a way, is a good thing in terms of the defense for the Texans and D'Amico Ryan's vision for what this is supposed to look like. The unfortunate thing is, one, offense is more fun than defense, right? Scoring points is more fun than preventing them. I'm talking from a fan's perspective. And two, CJ Stroud's the most important player on this team. If I had to pick a player I want to see have a good camp, I think it would be CJ Stroud. So he's really had some trouble getting things going. And and to be very clear, it's mostly the fault of the offensive line or whatever is causing all of these leaks up front, because there are so many plays where CJ has good throws. You got to keep in mind, they're not allowed to bring CJ Stroud to the ground. So they're not even really allowed to touch him except to tap him for a sack. So there have been so many throws that CJ's had that have looked really good, like good-looking throws, running to his left and flicking it deep. He did one of those today to Nico or Stefan. I can't remember who. But it would have been a sack in a real game. So he's had a bunch of those. The pass coverage has looked really good. I mean, Kamari Lassiter looks like a player right now. There's just no two ways about it. He is going to start at cornerback for this team unless something catastrophic happens, either with his performance or something injury-wise. He's going to start at corner for this team. And he's getting tested by some of the best in the league, and he is standing up in these tests. Kamari Lassiter has been one of the huge stories out of camp. I would say both corners, Stingley and Kamari Lassiter, are major story. They might be, well, it's tough to say because they've had so many defensive linemen get sacks. So let's just say that both of them are in the conversation for best defensive player of this training camp so far, Stingley and Kamari Lassiter, in my opinion. So that, again, another theme. So the only good thing about not having practice tomorrow is that the defense won't win a practice tomorrow. I want to see the offense win one of these. It had been pretty back and forth through like the first, 10 practices in? Like the first 6 practices, I would say, were a standoff. Some days the offense was better. Some days the defense was better. But the last 4 days, the 2 rainy practices, Friday and Saturday, and then the 2 practices this week, Monday and Tuesday, it's been very, very clear-cut wins on the defensive side of the football. What does that translate to in the regular season? I don't know that we'll even know until the regular season, because the fact of the matter is most of the players that matter on this team and that are going to decide the outcome of games certainly won't be playing in the Hall of Fame game on Thursday, and I doubt are going to see much time at all in preseason games. That Rams practice might be the one day that we get our best look at what the actual 2024 Houston Texans are in terms of going up against somebody other than the 2024 Houston Texans. So that was kind of my assessment of today overall. As far as notes from the practice goes, and I'm going to pull my phone out here and just read my notes off of my phone. The first thing is, the injuries, guys that were not out there today. Denico Autry was not out there. I'm guessing that had to do with his suspension. Let me make that clear too. Denico Autry is allowed to practice and play in preseason games. But once the preseason is over, he can't even come into the building for 6 weeks. So that's the downside of other than missing his services, he's not even allowed around the team during that suspension. So he was not practicing today. As far as guys who have not been practicing, period, Christian Harris, no practice for him today. Soft tissue is what I've seen reported. Aaron Wilson had that. Joe Mixon did not practice, but was working out pretty feverishly on the side field, like doing a lot of stuff with the GPS vest on and running with kind of the pulley, a coach like pulling on a pulley that was hooked to the back of his vest, like resistance type stuff. So Mixon, and he looks good. I'm not worried about Joe Mixon. Laramie Tunsil looks to be in great shape, yet still has not practiced yet. 10 practices in. He has yet to put on pads. He was practicing right next to Joe Mixon with the GPS vest on. Again, both of these guys look to be in tremendous condition, but they'll need to get out there eventually. It looked like Noah Brown had a Veterans Day off today. He was walking around, but he just didn't have a uniform on. If you're wondering how they handpick some of these guys to take days off, again, that GPS data that they get, they're all wearing GPS trackers that track all kinds of physiological stuff with them, how much they've run, heart rate, all that stuff. They get a lot of data, the team does, and then they make determinations maybe as to who as to they make determinations as to who should and shouldn't practice on a given day. Add Charlie Heck to the injury list. He has a foot injury that the team is taking a look at. If I'm not mistaken, it was a foot injury that kept him out for a big chunk of last year. So I hope that Charlie's okay. I know the big reason that Charlie came back this season to the Texans on a 1-year deal was to prove that he could stay healthy for a year. That's obviously taken a hit, so we'll see how serious that is, but he did not practice today. Andrew Beck did not practice today. He worked out on a side field. So I think I got everybody. CJ Henderson back at practice today. So those are your injuries. As far as other things going on, other notes, the Hall of Fame game, Denico Ryans met with the media after practice today. He is giving up nothing as far as who's going to play in the Hall of Fame game. Now, Davis Mills met with the media. He was one of the 3 players who did a press conference after today. He, again, did not show his cards or show his hand as to whether or not he was going to play in the Hall of Fame game. But the fact that he's doing a podium would lead me to believe that there's a good chance that Davis Mills at least plays a couple series in that game. I think there's 0 chance CJ Stroud plays in that game. We should make clear, too, Matt Eberflus is far more transparent than Denico Ryans is when it comes to stuff like this. Denico seemed to get a little agitated at the end of the press conference when he was asked who was going to play. He's like, I'm not going to give you a list. You'll see when the game starts. Matt Eberflus, according to Twitter, reportedly told reporters in Chicago none of the starters are going to play. And that's what I would expect with the Texans, too. I think the list of Houston Texans that won't play in the game is probably at least a couple dozen guys, just aren't even going to suit up. They got 90 guys on the roster right now. I mean, if you sit 30 guys, that's still bigger than far bigger than a normal game day roster in the NFL. And they have no need to take a look at guys like CJ Stroud or Nico Collins or Laramie Tunsil or, in defensive side of the ball, they have no need to look at Will Anderson or Danielle Hunter or Azeez Al-Shire or any of those guys. So the Texans put out a depth chart this week. And if you're starting to kind of plan for watching that game on Thursday night, I wouldn't even look at any of the names listed as first string. And I would say some of the names even at second string are probably doubtful to play in this game. But Denico doesn't feel like being asked about that anymore. Good news for him is he doesn't have to do any more press conferences between now and the Hall of Fame game. As far as stuff that I saw out at practice while they were practicing, during the one-on-ones, John Mechie looked really good. That's somebody I actually do hope we get to see play on Thursday night. I know they've been kind of handling him with kid gloves the last couple of years. But, man, he cooked a couple of guys. He cooked Kalen Bullock, and he cooked Mike Ford in the one-on-one drills. And I'm not just talking about like the normal, like, hey, the receiver's supposed to have the advantage in one-on-one type drills, which is true. I'm talking he put moves on these guys that sent them off the screen. Like John Mechie looks really good. And in one-on-one, Diggs had a nice back shoulder catch from CJ Stroud, so that was good to see. Again, when CJ's had time to throw, it's looked fine. It's just he hasn't had a ton of time to throw. So things that I saw, I mentioned Joe Mixon working out and looking good. A couple more plays, it would have been a sack, but a really nice crossing route to Nico Collins that CJ Stroud had. Unfortunately, it wouldn't have been a sack. The offense is just really having a tough time getting things going these last few practices. Kamari Lassiter had a really nice pass breakup on a pass intended for Tank Dell. Again, this was not the day I was hoping for. I'm waiting for a Tank Dell breakout day. We had so many of those in training camp last year where we just came away going, wow, this Tank Dell hasn't happened in this training camp. And maybe that's part and parcel of the defensive line having their way with the offensive line, but still kind of waiting on Tank Dell to have a few of those wow moments in 11 on 11. It has not come yet. So as far as other things we saw, Lonnie Johnson had a pick on a deep ball from one of the backup quarterbacks. CJ was a little inaccurate on a few balls. He sailed one to Tank. Stingley had a really nice pass breakup on a slant to Nico Collins. I should mention this about Nico Collins. The Texans have, you guys have probably seen this if you've watched some of the videos. The Texans have a cool zone, like a almost looks like the back of an 18-wheeler, like one of those crates that size on the back of an 18-wheeler, like a big room. And if you go in there, the temperature is in like the 40s or 50s. It's super cold, like hyper air conditioning in there, like really cold. Players go in there in between drills sometimes. Usually they go by position group and they go in there and they cool off. They sit in there for 4 or 5 minutes and they come back out and they continue practice. Nico Collins actually had to leave the 11-on-11 drills a couple of times today to go sit in the cool box. So I don't know if it was just a bad day for Nico handling the heat. Again, when he had the ball thrown his way, he looked fine. He looks to be in great shape, but it's something worth monitoring. Probably the highlight for the first team offense, I would say, again, in a day where they struggled quite a bit, is during the 2-minute drill. And I say 2-minute drill. There's only a minute 4 when they started this situationally. They gave the offense the ball 1st and 10 at their own 35 with a minute 4 to go. And CJ did a nice job of kind of dinking and dunking the ball down the field. By my count, he completed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He completed 8 passes. He threw the ball 10 times to get them in position. Like, that's how dink and dunk it was. But he was taking what the defense was giving him, and he was spreading the ball around to Dalton Schultz a few times. Tank made a couple catches. Stephon Diggs made a couple catches. Xavier Hutchinson caught a slant. He was in there for Nico, who, again, had gone to the cool box at that point. But the only incompletions that CJ had until the final play of that drive was a drop by Stephon Diggs on 1st and 15. Yes, there was another false start. And then the spiking of the ball to stop the clock at one point. So CJ was on target in the short game on that drive. The drive ended from the 15-yard line, or no, 1st and goal from the 8, I believe. And CJ threw a fade to Stephon Diggs in the back of the end zone, which Diggs caught, but he had a foot out of bounds. So it was ultimately an unsuccessful drive. But based on how that whole day went for the offense, it was good to see them at least move the ball and get something going and use that short game. My guess is, I was talking about this with my co-host Seth Payne and Cody Stutes and a few other people. Landry Locker was out there. We were kind of talking about the struggles of the offense. And my guess is, and Seth really hammered this home because Seth's the only one of us who's actually, game planned for an NFL game before, is that part of the reason the offense is struggling is they're trying to do their stuff that they do, the normal stuff. They're trying to get Stephon Diggs the ball. They're trying to see what their 3 wide receiver formations look like. They're trying to run their offense, but they're not really doing it based on what the defense has been dictating to them. They're more just running the offense. If this were the team that had to go out and play in week 1, they would probably be playing more 2 tight end sets to help with a rookie left tackle or running, more misdirection or whatever it may be. This defense can get over aggressive at times. It did that a few practices ago. They were just getting super aggressive because they knew what was coming. And so Bobby Slowick started calling some reverses and things like that just to keep the defense honest. It would probably look different with a real opponent out there. That's why I can't wait to see this first team actually go against somebody else's first team, even if it's for a few series. So there you go. That's what I saw out of practice today. For practice number 10. So again, mailbag episode tomorrow, houmailbag@gmail.com. If you want to get a last minute email in to me, but we'll do a mailbag episode. I'm going to record either tonight or tomorrow. And then we'll have a preview for the Hall of Fame game, which will drop Thursday, and then a review of the Hall of Fame game, which will drop on Friday. And Saturday, I shall rest and sit on my couch and watch Andre Johnson get inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So we haven't even talked about that. That'll probably be a mailbag topic. I would imagine a bunch of you have thoughts on Andre Johnson and the going into the Hall of Fame. Okay, so that's it for my producer, Anthony Irwin. Big thanks to him for getting the podcast out to you. Hey, all of you for listening, telling a friend, hitting that subscribe button, and sharing on social media. It's going to be a really fun season. I really appreciate you guys letting people know about the podcast. Hopefully I'm giving you what you want when it comes to making you feel like you're right at training camp, and that you're seeing enough that you need to see or hear to sound smart, I should say, at the water cooler at work, if people still drink by a water cooler at work. So for Anthony Irwin, I'm Sean Pendergast. Thanks to all of you. We will see you tomorrow, mailbag episode of the Utopia Football Podcast. Take care.